To your approved expenditure this year now, where are you? So let's say your expenditure in a particular item was $100,000, but for the whole year you only spent $20,000, but you're coming back to ask for $150,000. Well, clearly the Ministry of Finance would say, no, that don't make no sense. You couldn't even spend $100,000 you had last year. Now you're going to spend $150,000. You got to justify that. So unless there is some concrete approved project that can be justified in the context of what the Ministry of Finance has determined is the allowable limit on its overall increase in the budget, or not an increase, then you probably don't get that allocation. And all the ministries have to do this. And I can tell you it is an exercise in patience, because ministries typically, departments typically send you, just humongously bloated submissions that now have to be cut and slashed and cut. And there'll be several iterations of this, several occasions of submissions and cuttings and submissions and cuttings, and that can last up to the actual hours before the budget is printed for delivery in the House. You could be meeting with people to say, listen, I don't get this. I don't get this. Why is this necessary? Why is this spending necessary? And so that once that's done, then you have the budget laid out, printed, and that communication delivered to the House on what we call Budget Day. The Ministry of Finance itself would basically be involved with the forecast of revenue, and the government isn't required by law to submit the estimates of revenue so much, it's just to make sense to do so, not to do so, given you're submitting a budget, because what the law calls for the Minister of Finance to do is to submit estimates of expenditure. And so, but the forecasting is done by the, now they may have changed this of late and have both revenue and expenditure, but it used to be really the expenditure, and that is what the control is. So the House of Assembly will take a vote on two things. It will take a vote on borrowing. So the Minister of Finance cannot borrow without a resolution affirmatively passed in the House of Assembly. So you have to. So this is why sometimes I'm amazed when members seem shocked about the level of debt or borrowing, when in fact that borrowing has been approved at budget time. Okay? Now, if the borrowing exceeds that, it exceeds it within a certain limit that still has to come back to Parliament for the excess borrowing to also similarly be approved in a supplementary bill to Parliament. And so, but all borrowing in the Bahamas, no government of the Bahamas has ever borrowed a nickel or a dime, unless it did it unlawfully, that hasn't been and shouldn't have been approved by the Parliament. So the Parliament approves borrowings and expenditure. It doesn't approve revenue per se. Right? Now, it will have to approve revenue measures. So any new taxation or new fees, the Parliament will have to approve. We've got a call on the line. Go ahead, caller. We're listening to you.
Hey, big brother.
Yes, sir. How are you?
How you doing?
Right here, my friend.
I don't care what they say, how harsh Amos bring it when it comes to issues of national importance. I respect this host of this show. Let that be known. I respect Mr. Zhivago Lang, former minister, junior minister of finance. Now, when GATT was first introduced in 1994 and commenced by 1995.
GATT was introduced in 44.
Okay. What I'm saying here, we know the Marrakesh Agreement signed by 124 nations on the 15th of April 1994, replacing the GATT Agreement on tariff and trade. What I am saying is this: for 25, Well, first and foremost, like you said, these major organizations was around from 1948, okay? And what caused them to come about was the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then the other stuff came about. Everything else came after that. Now, the point I'm making here is this. From 1948 to let's say 1992, these foreign financial institutions wanted their hands on what was given back to the Bahamian people as of 1967 and then commenced officially by 1973, representing Independence Day. My point for you is this, sir, and no disrespect to you. Let me make that clear. I talk and it sounds like I'm talking to Mr. Lang, but let me correct that. I'm talking business, not Mr. Lang. Mr. Lang is my friend, as far as I'm concerned. I'm talking the business of the nation. So what I'm saying to you, sir, in 1992, 25 years after the Progressive Liberal Party failed to create a national, what I call a national sovereign wealth, because they knew everything about the natural resources. From then, now, 3 years after the Progressive Liberal Party would have lost the election in 1992, here comes a brand new Hubert Alexander Ingram, who have, in my humble opinion, carry on the deprivation that these people, the Bahamian people, this Bahamian divine community have suffered, okay? At least for the last 15 years of the former Progressive Liberal Party. Now, for the Free National Movement government to come in power in 1992, and then 3 years later, major WTO agreements were being signed or about to be entered in by the Bahamas government, unbeknown to the Bahamian people, without us having a freedom of information. We have to go to these foreign nations, you're all signing these agreements with to get the information.
I was going to let him go, you know. I just want people to listen. Yes, because I'm tired of it. I was just let him go, and let's see if he could talk for 2 hours, and the people who say, let him talk, see how much sense I make. Man, listen, at some point, we have got to stop fooling ourselves. You know, I tell people, listen, I don't help my children to do well if they don't do well, and I pretend it's okay. Logic is logic. Reason is reason. Clarity is clarity. And we should not on these shows tolerate some of the babble we get. It makes no sense. Now, Amos, I can tell you the truth. From henceforth and forevermore, when you call, I'm going to give you a shot. I'm going to give you a shot of clear, crisp, short interventions. And if it doesn't happen, my friend, I am not going to abuse the ears of the public with it. You have the capacity for intelligent dialogue. I see that. But you have to develop a disciplined man. You know, just because we have license to speak doesn't mean we should always speak. Sometimes we should save our time and just write our thoughts out, perhaps, and maybe we will find that we can do it with great clarity. But it's a challenge, man. This text says, Mr. Lang, I think you need a show on money management. I think that'll help the debt. Many people broke, not that they not making money, but they already spent the money they got. Bahamians don't know how to budget their finances, many of us. Then when we hear the budget report, they are wondering what's coming to them. If some people can't manage their finances, how do they handle someone else's finances, such as country or business, etc.? Well, you know, you can have financial knowledge. You can have knowledge of budgeting. That in and of itself doesn't get you to have the kind of financial circumstances that you want, because things can intervene in your circumstances to produce challenges, right? And you can have people with great financial knowledge who can utilize debt too, and in that leveraging, something happens that can cause them to run afoul into challenges as well. I think that what is important is for people to be able to, one, observe and listen to and read the details of what is presented at budget time. You will get a sense of what the Minister of Finance is proposing as the level of revenue he's